Ho-min and Hyun-soo stood in the square under the supervision of the elder's henchmen. Hyun-soo continued to explain his plan. As soon as the Platinum Monarch hears about the new currency in the city, he would show up at the same time to check it out. Hyun-soo promised to fill Ho-min in on the details later. They agreed to meet at 7 in the evening outside the elder's office. Baek Ho-min was worried that his friend might be being followed, but Hyun-soo ignored this and asked again about Ho-min's skill level. Ho-min replied that he had a 4th level skill, which was of no use to him at all. But Hyun-soo, like the elder's men, didn't believe him, saying that he didn't have to tell the truth if he didn't want to. Logically, there was no way Baek Ho-min could defeat the leader of the elder's thugs without a steep skill. Hyun-soo didn't question him and disappeared from Baek Ho-min's sight to prepare a plan. Left alone, Baek Ho-min asked his siblings what they thought about the situation. The only one of them gave him a simple, like, agreeing with his thoughts. In the evening, Baek Ho-min decided to leave the tower. He hadn't been outside the tower for several months, so he had to visit the city. Old Seoul. When it got dark, Baek Ho-min reached an abandoned industrial building. It was a local drug den. Looking at the people surrounding the building, he concluded that a drug den was a much more pleasant place than public guilds. The person in charge of selling the goods asked Ho-min what he wanted to buy, but Ho-min wanted to sell his unnecessary things on the contrary. This surprised the man. Why sell things here if there are guilds in the tower? Could it be something illegal? But Baek Ho-min assured the man that everything was clean and offered to take a look at the goods. Going inside to one of the brothel's rooms, Baek Ho-min laid out everything he had collected from the hunters he had killed so far. The trafficker was interested. The goods were really good, and the man asked who exactly Baek Ho-min was working for. But the guy asked him to ask fewer questions and clarified that he did not need money. Ho-min wanted to exchange the useless artifacts for something more useful to him for the same price, so he asked the merchant to evaluate the goods. The man said that the items were in good condition, so he could offer 8,000. This was even more than Baek Ho-min had expected. Most likely, the prices had risen because of the Platinum Monarch's manipulations with the elevators and the blocking of paths in the tower. Baek Ho-min immediately agreed to the proposed price. Since he was going to change, he asked to sell the items at a lower price. The trader asked what exactly Baek Ho-min needed. He said knives. He asked the shopkeeper to bring out all the knives he had in stock. After a while, the weapons were brought into the room. Ho-min immediately began to examine them and evaluate them with the help of the Constellations. The warrior king gave some of the knives bad marks. The merchant did not understand what exactly Baek Ho-min was muttering under his breath. But when he looked at the way Baek Ho-min sorted the knives according to their quality, he realized that the boy knew a lot about weapons. Without making any mistakes, Baek Ho-min separated the high-quality and undamaged blades from the old and fragile ones. The last knife he got his hands on was a rare class of knife. It was called a screaming knife, and its peculiarity was that it made a sharp noise with every swing. Although this knife was rare, no one wanted to take it because of its useless ability, so the merchant decided to sell it to Ho-min. The man offered 8,000 for the rare item, which was all of Baek Ho-min's capital. The boy noticed that the knife was quite interesting, but asked the merchant how much the knives on the left cost. The merchant was surprised. Ho-min placed the high-quality knives, which were suitable for many battles, on his right shoulder. On the left was all kinds of junk that he was ashamed to even put a price on. A little nervous, the merchant said the price was 3,000. Baek Ho-min agreed, and since he didn't need anything else, he asked for the remaining 8,000 in cash. But it was not profitable for the trader at all. The elevators were not working, so it was unknown how long it would take for the normal flow of currency to resume. He had to save money as much as possible. So he said he wouldn't give Ho-min the 5,000 in cash, and offered to get Ho Min the screaming knife instead. Ho Min smiled and agreed. The trafficker fell for his plan. In addition to the deal, Ho Min asked for a long hooded jacket. Meanwhile, 7 o'clock was approaching. Ho Min was approaching the meeting place. With confidence in his eyes, he asked a rhetorical question to the Constellations. Are they ready? The elder's office looked like an old building from pre-modern times. Once inside, Ho Min headed for the room where Hyun-soo was supposed to be waiting for him. Moving cautiously and quietly, he reached the door. Once inside, he noticed that Hyun-soo was not alone. A bunch of armed thugs led by the elder himself were already waiting for him. Hyun-soo was beaten and tied up. Hyun-soo asked Ho Min why he had come here alone. But Baek Ho Min told him that he had a feeling that this was exactly what would happen. He said that Hyun-soo was the only person he considered a friend. Ho Min didn't want to believe that he was right until the end. Hyun-soo said he didn't understand what he was talking about. But if Ho Min's assumption was correct, then he had to kill his friend. Hyun-soo was scared. Ho Min explained. If he had managed to steal from the elder and escape before Hyun-soo framed him, he would have had no reason to kill his friend. But Hyun-soo had been in cahoots with the bandits from the beginning. The elder had hoped that Hyun-soo would be useful as a hostage, but no one in the room believed him anymore. Hyun-soo looked at the elder and began to apologize to him in a panic, which finally gave him away. He even let himself be beaten to make it more convincing. But Ho Min thought that this was the only way for Hyun-soo to survive, so maybe he shouldn't be angry with him. Ho Min turned his attention to the bandits. Each of them was armed to the teeth. This city was full of devils. And in order to survive, Ho Min had to become a devil himself. The elder was sure that he had the advantage, so he suggested that Baek Ho Min surrender. If Baek Ho Min wanted to survive, he had to work for the elder as a hunter for another 20 years. The elder began to talk about money, weapons, and recognition. But Baek Ho Min told him that he hadn't originally come to the office to steal the safe. The robbery was only an alternative. He didn't want to kill his friend with his own hands. But if he has no choice, that elder will die right after Hyun-soo. After that, he'll kill the spider if it gets in his way, then the godless paladins, and then even the platinum monarch himself. The elder's people started laughing immediately. They said that one must know the limits of one's abilities. Laughing at the boy, they said that they did not understand how their leader died at the hands of such a braggart. The elder felt that behind the laughter his people were hiding an overwhelming anxiety. He did not understand how it was possible to change so much in just 6 months. Baek Ho Min continued his manic speech. He said that he would kill anyone who pointed a knife at him, take them out of hell, and cut off their heads. The elders also panicked, but rejected this emotion. Even if Ho Min had changed, he was still the little boy begging under his wing. The elder shouted that he had had enough and ordered the boy to be killed, and the hand with the seal brought to him. The thugs attacked Ho Min in a heap. But the boy already had a plan. He activated the warrior king's skill. Master of 10,000 swords. He picked up a screaming knife and waved it in the air. The knife cracked, but the effect was enormous. A piercing screech filled the entire building. The light bulbs began to crack, casting the room in pitch blackness. The elder's men clutched their ears, trying to muffle the incessant screaming. Their eardrums could not take it anymore. The sound filled the entire building. Ho Min's knife began to fall apart in his hands. This was the price of using the warrior king's skill without proper experience with weapons. But Baek Ho Min was prepared for such consequences. The attack was still incredibly useful. He threw the rest of the knife aside and unzipped his jacket. The real battle was about to begin. The thugs realized that this attack was planned. This dirty trick enraged them. The elder thought that Ho Min was trying to escape from him in this way. So he told his men to find a lantern and kill the boy. But it was a mistake. Ho Min was not going to run away. He summoned the warrior king and rushed into battle. Immediately, he managed to stab one of the enemies with a knife, tearing open his stomach. The next one, who wanted to attack Baek Homin from behind, instantly lost his arm. The axe fell to the floor with it severed. With a finishing attack, Homin pierced the enemy's neck. But hearing the sounds, other thugs were already rushing into the fight. Pulling out 2 more knives, Homin slashed his attacker's throat. One of the bandits panicked and asked how Homin could see them in such darkness. After saying this out loud, he immediately died from a sharp stab to the neck. The truth was that Homin did not see anyone in the house. But the body that he had been training all this time reacts to the instincts of the warrior king. Homin feels the fear of enemies even if they are not in his field of vision. One of the thugs managed to hit Baek Homin with a knife, but the armor made of beetle shells was impenetrable. With a counterattack to the head, Baek Homin killed the Nedrigwa, piercing him through and through. The knife's blood was flying everywhere. The bandits continued to freak out. One of them lit a magic lamp to see Homin, but it was too late. In one sharp movement, the boy approached him and slit his throat, and in the same second, he killed 2 more with precise stabs. One of the elder men shouted to his allies to use their skills. But Homin's speed of attack was unsurpassed. He put his armored shoulder under the blow, and then finished the bandit off with a kick to the body. As he was dying, the bandit called Homin the devil, who came down from the tower and fell dead. Baek Homin looked around at the pile of dead bodies. These people, after learning bad skills and being disappointed in their dreams of conquering the tower, broke down and started killing, robbing, and raping. Homin said that the bandits are the devils of this city. Baek Homin's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door closing. Looking around, he didn't see the elder and Hyunsu. They had both fled during the battle. Stepping over the dead bodies, Homin rushed to catch up with the two. There was nowhere to run. Meanwhile, the one noticed that this was a new record. And this record was not for killing people in a short period of time. It was a record for the number of dangerous situations in which Baek Homin could die. The only one who didn't like that the guy was taking such a risk. Dynamite also agreed that it was reckless to come to the lair and wait for a trap there. But despite this, Homin was going to kill everyone there anyway. We had to find a more effective way to solve the problem. The only one who noticed that after the guy there was a new problem. A woman who would appear. When each of the past lives killed an elder, it was she who appeared. From that moment on, everything depended on luck. Baek Homin found the wounded elder behind an office building. He could no longer stand on his feet, but still tried to escape. Homin noticed the condition of the man. The elder started shouting again about ingratitude and how he was the one who raised Homin and Hyunsu. Then Homin realized that the wound in the elder's heart was from his former comrade. Hyunsu decided to mortally wound the bandit to frame Baek Homin. Homin realized that the dying old man was no longer a threat to him and leaned over to talk to him. He asked how the elder had become so miserable, but the elder still held on to life. He said that his death would have catastrophic consequences. Homin replied that he realized that the spider would most likely hunt him down. Therefore, Homin advised the elder to pay off the spider to survive. The elder immediately agreed and told him where he had 2 gold bars, each worth 10 gold pieces. He also added that he could not give more, because he needed the money to run the city. But Baek Homin was not satisfied. He was not going to leave the elder in power, so he ordered him to give him everything. The elder continued to argue. He said that the spider was planning something big. Not only the neighborhood he controlled, but the entire city would be involved. Moreover, the entire tower was included in this plan. The elder was also a cog in this plan. He promised to put in a good word with the spider. Many hunters have already died, so the mafia needs people like Homin. But this agreement was not to be. Blood gushed out of the elder's mouth. The old man had promised Homin a place in the spider legs when he was dying. Homin believed him, because there was no point in lying before death. Ho Ming decided to save him by calling Dynamite. But Dynamite saw the wound and said that too much blood had been lost. The light in the elder's eyes had already faded. Even after the Constellation arrived, it was too late. Baek Ho-min finally said, "Sleep well." The elder tried to say what would happen to Baek Ho-min, but before he could finish, he collapsed. Inspecting the corpse, Ho-min said that it was a fitting end for the elder. He wanted to say that his ties with the elder had been severed, but he heard a phrase from behind him ordering him not to move. A strange trembling gripped his entire body, and then he fell to the ground. He noticed two girls in white uniforms. One of them said that they had detained a suspicious person, and the other praised her for it. Baek Ho-min recognized the uniforms. It was the godless Paladins. The girl with the black hair was sitting over the immobilized boy. She was amazed that such a young boy could kill so many. Ho Ming realized that the Paladins had already checked the entire office. The woman with the blue hair said that if Baek Ho Ming's seal didn't show any signs of being strengthened, then he had either become a parasite or possessed by a shadow beast. Baek Ho Min couldn't move because of the suppression skills of one of them. It felt like his head was cut off from his body. The dark-haired girl said that she was the ruler of this tower. She is a platinum monarch named Yoon Seo Hyun. Baek Ho Min was surprised that it was a platinum monarch in front of him. The girl explained that she was personally investigating a case of counterfeit coins that were being actively distributed. Counterfeits that were created right before the launch of the new currency were a serious problem. The monarch could not find a place for herself, but Baek Ho Min seemed to have solved all her problems. Baek Ho Min was shocked. Could it be that the monarch would have killed the elder with her own hands? But the girl continued. She said that this was not a problem where she could act rashly. If the old man had escaped, the spider would never have been quiet. The monarch began to unbandage Ho Min's hand, which had the seal on it. But if the elder died, the spider would give up the idea. Thanks to this, the Paladins confiscated the money made by criminal means. The monarch noticed the pattern of Ho Min's seal and thought for a moment, then continued. Despite the fact that the boy's actions were favorable to the monarch, no one but the Paladins can commit vigilante justice, so the boy will face the death penalty for killing 8 people. Ho Min was scared. But the girl was in no hurry to finish her speech. Fortunately, there were 2 ways out. The first was to stand trial and face death at the hands of the monarch, and the second was to pretend that Ho Ming had been hired by the monarch as her personal hunter and had taken these measures after going through the necessary administrative procedures. At first glance, the choice was obvious: saving his life. But even if he survived, after accepting such conditions, his life would be completely in the hands of the Platinum Monarch. Baek Ho Min needed the advice of a friend. That's why the only thing he said after his capture was what he should do. The monarch thought that Ho Min was turning to her and asking her to decide his fate. Meanwhile, the warrior king sent Ho Min a like. But no more likes came. This meant that the Unified and Dynamite were opposed. Baek Ho Min knew that the Constellations meant him no harm if any of them opposed the agreement, and there were good reasons for it. He apologized to the monarch and was about to say that he could not accept the deal. But before he could finish speaking, the girl spoke about the financial component of the agreement. Every month, the monarch's hunters receive 50 silver coins. And for every day they stay in the tower, they get 10 extra. Ho Min could not believe what he was hearing. The monarch would also give him a place to live in the ruler's castle, and a discount on seal upgrades. Baek Ho Min agreed in a heartbeat. The monarch mockingly said that Ho Min agreed too quickly. But in his opinion, such an offer could not be refused. So, hiding behind the warrior king, he accepted the deal. The only one who was angry about Ho Ming's agreement was the king. In his opinion, if the monarch had gone so far for him, she would definitely not kill him. But Dynamite realized that none of the past Ho Mins would have refused such a deal. The only one remembered who the Platinum Monarch was, just like the other lives. Dynamite noticed that each of them had gone through this choice. In addition, the Monarch saved his life and gave him a real opportunity to become a hunter. There was obviously only one choice. The only one said that the Platinum Monarch never makes decisions that can harm her, which means she is definitely planning something. The Constellations knew what fate awaited Homan next, but it was still a surprise for the boy. The Warrior King, as the last one to die, was curious about what the others had to say about the proposal. He said that he regretted his agreement in the future, but he had little choice. The only one said that in the past he was also angry at the king's decision. The king would have died after the battle with the elder if the monarch had been late. Dynamite said that at the time the monarch found him, he was already a member of the guild. His skill specialized in alchemy and was quite valuable, so he avoided being involved. After trying to peel his seal off a piece of iron, his body was slightly deformed, but it was not a mistake. The only one said that he immediately gained a good skill, so he was able to take revenge much faster and did not have to rely on the monarch's help. The Warrior King replied that the one and only were just lucky with Dynamite. But the only one said that the king was also quite lucky. Other Baek men who failed to prove their worth were either ignored or killed by the Platinum Monarch. The only one who reminded me that the monarch puts price tags on people and uses them as she pleases, and when she has enough, she throws them away. The warlike king agreed with him. In his view of her, he could trust the monarch, but he could never call her a friend. In the past, the king had quarreled with the monarch because of her cynical attitude toward people. But that was not all that could be said about her. In the past, the monarch sacrificed her life for the sake of the warrior king. It is not known why, but at that moment she decided that Baek Ho-min's life was more valuable than hers. The warrior king could never forget the image of that lonely snow-covered back. And the king sent a message about the monarch's proposal, because the memories got into his head. The Constellations were confused, but one fact is certain. Baek Ho-min had become the Platinum Monarch's hunter, and had also overcome the curse of death, and would not die in the first month. The Constellations decided to dismiss the bad news and celebrate this victory. The next day, Ho-min woke up in a huge palace. The day was quite sunny. He lifted his head and looked around. It was a luxurious bedroom with a huge bed. The place was filled with expensive porcelain fittings. Baek Ho-min remembered that he had been brought here yesterday after the incident, and he had passed out after drinking some suspicious tea. An unexpected development. Baek Ho-min examined his seal, and the condition of his body in general. It turned out that he had been treated while he was sleeping. The thought crept into his mind that the monarch was not as cruel as they say. Suddenly, Baek Ho-min noticed a girl in the Paladin's van standing in his room. The girl who had accompanied the monarch yesterday said that it was better for him to stay still for now. He needed time to recover. Baek Ho-min recognized her immediately. He immediately asked how long she had been here. The girl replied that she was the commander of the godless paladins, and her name was Dal Palak. Baek Ho-min was surprised and scared at the same time. He had heard of this girl, and she was given this name because she used to cut off people's heads like a doll. She usually carried a huge sword with her. As an executioner of cult members, she became the head when the Platinum Monarch came to power. Her reputation as an executioner was gained by her ruthless treatment of criminals. Ho-min was embarrassed to see her so close for the first time. The girl did not understand what exactly he was talking about. Baek Ho-min explained that he had once seen Paladin rescuing people at a crime scene. She broke into a building and saved 3 children inside. The girl was embarrassed and a little confused, saying that it was nothing unusual and that anyone would have done it in her place. The executioner Dal was the hunter closest to the current constellations and had 4 whole stars. For ordinary people, she was a hero. The fact is that the current constellations never leave the tower. That's why the only person who is close to both the constellations and ordinary people is the tower doll. Baek Homin continued to tell the girl about her exploits. When a beast appeared on the 28th floor, bringing bad predictions for the future, Executioner doll fought it by herself for 3 days and received a star for it. The doll denied this fact, saying that the battle lasted only a day. Then Baek Homin asked another question. His interest was not quenched. Was it true that the girl herself had killed Baek Jo-wook and his organization? This person was one of the spider legs. Homin was especially curious. There were also rumors that the girl had stopped one of the cult members who wanted to poison the water supply. Homin was not going to stop. The girl just kept getting embarrassed and saying that these stories were exaggerated. She said she just did what she had to do. Homin asked if she knew she was being called a hero. People say that she is the only paladin who really cares about the fate of ordinary people. Liolka replied that she didn't think she was worthy of the title hero. It's just her duty. And she added in response, Homin himself took care of the elder and his thugs with his own hands. Baek Homin sincerely said that his feat was a much lower level, and they were just average bandits. He was no match for the Paladin doll. The girl's gaze changed dramatically. She looked at Baek Homin with a reproachful look and attested to the fact that Baek Homin did not have any accomplices. Homin became alert. He realized that the girl wasn't just standing there to chat with him. The Paladin doll looked at him sternly and said that she had noticed his attempt to talk her into talking. This time, the boy realized that doll's shyness and embarrassment were just a tool to lower his guard. Ho Ming exhaled a sigh of relief and confirmed that he had no accomplices. He added that he wasn't trying to appease her. He just really admired her. The girl asked if it was true. Baek Homin asked why he was under surveillance. The monarch told him that hunters under her wing are not prosecuted. The doll replied that this surveillance takes place independently of the ruler's will. For the ruler to exempt Homin from the law, a basic legal procedure was required. Baek Homin understood. Regardless of the supreme power, the paladins clearly state that they are a punitive unit and are not dependent on the rules of the tower. The hunter doll started asking questions. First of all, she asked whether Baek Homin had visited the security zone of Seoul Tower in its vicinity or the basement of the tower. Baek Homin denied it. Without lingering on the first question, doll immediately asked the next one. Namely, how could Baek Homin, with a 4th level seal, kill so many people? It didn't even show any traces of refinement. Baek Homin hesitated for a moment, but finally decided to tell the truth. The constellations helped him. The puppet immediately asked which constellations, and Baek Homin had to say their names and titles. Baek Homin felt a lump in his throat. He realized that if this girl was listening so closely, she must have her own guesses about this. Should he have told her their ranks? Suddenly, a light from dynamite appeared in front of Baek Homin's eyes. Baek Homin immediately named him. The puppet repeated the name after him. Baek Homin said that this was due to the blessing of the constellations, but it is also possible that it is his own hidden potential. There are constellations that have accidentally reached heights. The doll suggested that Baek Homin might be a prophet. Prophets are the youngest constellations in existence. They have risen to the current constellations with incredible speed. The doll told Homin that there was a good chance that Baek Homin was possessed by a shadow, or had become a parasite in the tower. In this case, even the status of the ruler's hunter would not save him. Baek Homin understood. The girl was hinting at him that he needed to prove that he belonged to humans. The seal disappears from people who have become parasites. But this only applies to seals made of gold. Not a single parasite with a silver seal has been registered. Most likely, parasites are not interested in silver because of its lower price. There was only one way to find out if Ho Ming was a parasite. The doll asked him to follow her for an interrogation with the monarch. Baek Ho-min went with the doll to the palace courtyard and immediately heard someone begging for mercy. Walking further, he saw a group of people tied up. One of them begged to be released, while another, even while immobilized, threatened to kill the monarch. The monarch took one of them by the neck with her hand and began to strangle him, passing sentence on him. She called his name and his crime, namely the rape of 3 girls. Her hand on his neck kept tightening, and the hair began to fall out of the criminal's head. The monarch said that in accordance with the law she would atone for his sin. With her hand, the monarch pulled all the energy out of the man, leaving him a lifeless, gaunt mummy. Only after the last drop of strength left the criminal's body did the monarch release her hand, and the lifeless body fell to the ground. The monarch told the man that he should rethink his sins in the next life. She was holding something in her hand. A paladin with a saucer approached her ruler. The monarch opened her hands over it, and a couple of gold coins fell out. One of the living prisoners asked the monarch why she had the right to punish them. But the ruler was not going to answer the criminal's questions, and continued to read out the sentences. The next one she punished was for arson and murder. Saying that this man's sins were incorrigible, she took the life out of his body and threw it on the floor. Then she poured several coins on the saucer again. Then she repeated the same with the last man. When she was done, and all 3 were lying dead, she turned toward Baek Ho-min. The monarch said that he had shown Ho-min something indecent. Baek Ho-min realized that it was the other way around. She had deliberately killed those people in front of him. He was reluctant to say his name. The doll asked the monarch if she could use the courtyard. The monarch asked why. The doll was probably going to test Ho-min's skills herself. The paladin confirmed that she was going to interrogate the boy. She made a suggestion. If Ho Ming really killed 10 thugs, then he would be able to perform well in a battle against her. But the monarch said that was a bit much. Instead, the monarch suggested that he demonstrate his skills himself and ordered him to bring the victim here. After a while, the paladins brought not just anyone, but Hyun-soo himself, who immediately recognized Ho-min. The monarch asked Baek Ho-min if the boy they had captured was indeed a subordinate of the elder, and was in the building with the others. Ho-min confirmed this fact. Tears began to form in Hyun-soo's eyes. He didn't understand why Ho-min was standing next to the monarch. Ho-min realized that the boy had been caught against his will. Suddenly, he heard a shout from all 3 of the constellations. The monarch began to unwind the bandage on Ho-min's arm, repeating the word calmly. All 3 lights came to Ho-min again. He realized it was support. It was a wake-up call. Ho-min took his hand away from Monarch, which caused her great surprise. She looked at Baek Ho-min with an incredible desire to kill. She asked Ho-min to have someone calm them down if they didn't want to die. Ho-min couldn't believe what he was hearing. Could she really be talking to the constellations? The monarch came closer to the boy and began to whisper in his ear. She assured him that it was for the good of Ho-min himself. The boy was very scared. The monarch grabbed his hand again. Baek Ho-min did not understand what was happening, but he seemed to feel a battle between the constellations and the platinum monarch. The monarch smiled menacingly, which made the one a little wary. A second later, the ruler said that everything was ready and finished an incomprehensible procedure. The monarch advised Ho-min not to worry about the consequences and to show her what was behind the seal. Ho-min did not understand at first, but when he looked at the seal, he noticed that his terrible iron seal had turned into a platinum one, and the pain had also left his hand. The monarch then read out Hyun-soo's sins. They included theft, violence, murder, and obstruction of justice, adding that attacking the ruler's minions while they were on a secret mission was a serious crime. Hyun-soo was scared out of his mind. He couldn't believe that Baek Ho-min was the ruler's hunter. But Baek Ho-min realized that the monarch was lying to save his life. The monarch said that she usually punishes everyone herself, But this time she wanted to see the skills of her new hunter and asked Ho-min if he could do it. Baek Ho-min did not understand what exactly he had to do, and the monarch immediately threw the sword on the battlefield. Only one sword for the two of them, and she ordered them to start. Both boys realized what was coming next. Hyun-soo looked at Ho-min with a heartbreakingly pitiful look, then closed his eyes and rushed to the sword, betraying his friend once again. All he could manage was to shout the word, "I'm sorry." Ho-min was shocked by his friend's actions. Hyun-soo did not stop his weak and inaccurate attacks, which Ho-min could easily dodge. Hyun-soo shouted that he would come to Ho-min's grave if he died for him. But Baek Ho-min pointed out that the monarch had not promised Hyun-soo a pardon if he killed his friend. But Hyun-soo immediately jumped for his sword. During the fight, Ho-min kept wondering what exactly the monarch was trying to make sure of. Was it his ability to kill the thugs? If that was really the case, then she should have let the executioner doll come out to fight. But that wasn't the point. She looked at Ho-min's hand and waited for him to use his memory skill. But Ho-min was waiting for a more appropriate moment. It was still too early. He slipped past Hyun-soo's next attack and punched him in the nose, then grabbed his sword hand and throat. In a whisper, Ho-min began to communicate with Hyun-soo. Holding him tightly, he asked him once again if he remembered the moment when the monarch released the criminals. Ho-min explained that she wasn't going to do that. He offered Hyun-soo a plan. He'll pretend that he accidentally let his opponent go. At that moment, Hyun-soo should run for the exit behind Ho-min's back. Hyun-soo realized that Ho-min was deliberately moving toward the exit to avoid his attacks. Baek Ho-min ordered Hyun-soo to kick him on command and then run away. Hyun-soo, realizing that this was his only chance, agreed and thanked his friend. Ho-min gave the command. Hyun-soo punched Ho-min and broke free of the grip. Ho-min waited for his friend to run, but he just looked at him pitifully. But Hyun-soo did not run away. He tried to kill Ho-min one more time. His eyes reflected absolute betrayal and fear. Ho-min was in a difficult situation, but only at first glance. With a sharp left punch, he repelled Hyun-soo's attack. Ho-min was furious because of the betrayal. He gave his friend one last chance. He went around Hyun-soo's back and thanked him for remaining a traitor to the very end. Now Ho-min could kill him without hesitation. Hyun-soo was in a death throes. He begged Ho-min to stop and listen to him. But Ho-min didn't care anymore. He ordered the traitor to shut up and broke his neck. Hyun-soo couldn't even breathe. He fell down dead. The monarch immediately praised Ho-min. The monarch realized that Ho-min was trying to save his enemy to the last. She had also heard rumors that this was not the first time Hyun-soo had betrayed him. Ho-min explained that the traitor had been his friend before, so he didn't want to kill him. The monarch remarked that Baek Ho-min had killed him without hesitation. He replied that he didn't think it was necessary to feel sorry for friends like Hyun-soo. Monarch knelt down in front of Hyun-soo's corpse. She said that she liked the straightforwardness of the decision. Ho-min confirmed that he had not thought about it for long. The monarch added that she did not condemn the boy. Many people die when they cannot make a decision. Ho-min closed his eyes. The monarch continued her speech. She said that an important personal quality of a hunter is quick and unwavering determination. The monarch said that Ho-min would make a good hunter. The screaming doll interrupted the monarch by reminding him that the reason paladins obey the ruler is because the ruler upholds the laws. But right now, the monarch was purposefully avoiding the legal process for Baek Ho-min. The monarch held up a coin she had taken from Hyun-soo. She explained that she was using such methods to prevent the death of their little hero. She bit the platinum coin with her teeth and then gave it to Ho-min, congratulating him on his first mission and the fact that Ho-min was now the ruler's hunter. She gave the coin to him as a memento of today. Ho-min fell into deep thought. Previously, he had to work like an ox, endure pain and humiliation for just one gold coin. And now, he receives a platinum coin from the monarch. The only shame is that it's for the death of his only friend, Hyun-soo. His thoughts were interrupted by the monarch's hand stroking his head. As she stroked Baek Ho-min's hair, the monarch said that she did not understand why Ho-min was hiding his skills. But she added that it doesn't matter now. He would still become the ruler's hunter. Ho-min was embarrassed and blushed like a tomato. He had never felt such a gentle girl's hand before. The monarch smiled imperceptibly, lifting the edges of her lips. Meanwhile, in their subconscious, the Constellations did not understand what was happening to the monarch. The king and the one were shocked. They had never seen her like this. But Dynamite suggested that the monarch had fallen in love. In love with Baek Ho-min. The only one was not satisfied with this. He would always remember what Baek Ho-min went through because of her. Moreover, half of the deaths were because of her. The king confirmed this. He also died while in her unit. And in general, in the opinion of the one, Dynamite had no right to talk about such things. The monarch made Dynamite work without rest, and never patted him on the head. Dynamite said that was true, but she did sometimes gently encourage him. Their conversation was interrupted by the king, who suggested that they talk about more important things. Namely, about covering the seal. He was the only one who expected such an outcome after becoming a thinker ruler. Many Ho-min died due to metal intoxication from the unfinished seal. But in this case, the warrior king did not understand why the one tried to stop it before the battle. The only one who answered was that she was not just trying to fix the seal, but was somehow trying to interact with it. It was strange and made him wary. The king asked if the monarch was really up to no good. But the one could not answer this question. Only time could clarify it. But it seems that the Platinum Monarch is aware of the existence of the Constellations. She dared to look into their world. Fortunately, the one was able to stop it and minimize all the risks. The king was still worried that the existence of the Constellations inside Ho-min had been revealed. But it turned out that the one showed the monarch only Dynamite. Dynamite didn't mind if the Scarecrow doll knew his name, so the one showed it only to the monarch. But Dynamite did not like it. He allowed himself to be revealed to the puppet only because of the one's phrase that Dynamite was the weakest of the three. But Dynamite asked why the one had introduced him to the monarch. For the one, the answer was simple. Dynamite is the loser among the Baek Ho-min, so he should be the one to introduce them to the monarch. Meanwhile, in the castle, the monarch and Ho-min began a dialogue. The monarch said that she had heard about a constellation named Dynamite that was watching over the boy. Ho-min confirmed this information. The monarch smiled and repeated the word Dynamite. She asked Baek Ho-min to tell her more about him. This alerted Ho-min and Dynamite. The monarch told Baek Ho-min for the situation involving his hand. Ho-min asked if it had to do with the seal. The monarch explained that a seal not made of gold is fatal to the human body. Until the hand is cut off from the body, the poisonous metal and burns kill the person. The ruler said that Ho-min was good at using a seal, but he could not burn his hand in every battle. Baek Ho-min agreed. He fully understood the condition of his seal. The monarch smiled. If the boy understood, it would be much easier to explain everything. She applied a coating to his seal. The poison would no longer spread through the guy's body, and the seal's activation time would also increase. Baek Ho-min asked if the seal would heat up less, but the monarch denied it. She couldn't stop the heat from building up. It was the cost of using the skill. But if he could use the seal for a minute, he could now use it for 2 whole minutes. Baek Ho-min looked at his seal. He was confused. Not only had the monarch helped him escape punishment and given him the title of hunter, but she had also strengthened his seal. In a sense, she was his savior. Ho-min thanked the girl. But this fact made Ho-min even more afraid of her. There must be some reason for her actions. The monarch said that she wanted to see Ho-min's skills personally, but she was not going to take a bone from her dogs by force. She suggested that Homin strengthen his seal. Homin was surprised. But this is only possible if the constellations that watch over the boy allow it. Homing became wary. Then Monarch suggested that they talk about the dynamite constellation. She asked the boy to tell her everything he knew about dynamite. The boy agreed and began his story. When he finished, Monarch asked if that was all he knew. Baek Homin said yes. She was not satisfied with Homin's story. There were many inconsistencies, because the one and warrior king could not be mentioned. The monarch asked if dynamite was helping Homin for free. Baek Homin confirmed this fact. The monarch thought about it, and then said she understood. She looked Homin in the eye. The monarch asked if Baek Homin knew that the tower was now completely closed. Baek Homin knew about it. There were a lot of people on the ground floor. The monarch explained that it was a security measure. A huge anomaly had recently occurred in the tower. Baek Homin did not understand what the monarch meant. The monarch said that several hitherto unknown constellations had been spotted in the tower. He was surprised. In this world, in order to become a constellation, one must receive stars. By gaining fame and achieving success, you can become a constellation when you get 5 stars. At this stage, all known constellations appeared in this way. Based on this fact, it's hard to believe that the unknown constellations came out of nowhere. Baek Homin asked the monarch if she knew their names. The monarch said that although they have been observing them, they have not learned anything so far. But they suspect that one of them is named Dynamite. The monarch asked Baek Homin how he felt about it. Baek Homin was wary and unsure of his answer. The viceroy looked at him suspiciously. Baek Homin did not know if he had done the right thing by revealing the dynamite. The monarch continued her story. After the appearance of these constellations, the tower went through a major structural failure. Monarch's people are investigating the matter. Baek Homin asked what Monarch meant by structural changes. According to Monarch, locations and parasites that should appear on the upper floors began to appear on the lower floors. This meant that locations that were in a stable state got out of control. With these changes, the elevators became unsafe to use and were forced to be blocked. Baek Homin thought it was the design of the new currency, but it was much more serious. It didn't look like Monarch was lying now. The monarch also didn't know the reason for the unexpected appearance of the constellations, but she hoped it was for the best. Monarch got up from her seat and started to leave the room. She said that one of the hunters had already finished his investigation and returned. He would teach Ho Ming everything he needed to know. Ho Ming was surprised that he was not the only hunter of the ruler. The monarch said no. There are not many rulers, but among them, there are excellent hunters. The monarch introduced Ho Min to a young man who wore an eye patch over one of his eyes. His name was Kong Ha-jin. He was the same age as Ho Min. The monarch hoped that they would become friends as senior and junior subordinates. The monarch then introduced Ha-jin to Baek Homin. She asked Ha-jin to teach her colleague the basics needed to be a hunter-ruler. Ha-jin asked if he really needed to do this again. Obviously, he didn't really want to. The monarch told Ho Min that Kong Ha-jin had been working for her for 2 years, and that Ho Min could learn a lot from him. Ho Min looked at him warily. The boy had been working as the monarch's hunter for 2 years, which meant that he had become a hunter when he was a teenager. Ho Ming thought that he would be the youngest here. The monarch again reminded the 2 boys that they should become comrades. Ho Ming saw no reason to be hostile to his new friend. He introduced himself and extended his hand to the other man. But the guy turned his head to the left and ignored him. Baek Homin was not happy about this, and told Monarch that Ha-jin probably didn't like him. But Monarch assured him that he was just shy. But Baek Homin didn't believe it. Ha-jin's face said that he had no intention of communicating with Ho Min. Ho Min was a little annoyed. The monarch said that one way or another, Ha-jin would tell him all the details, and that since Ho Min was still weak, he would need to train. Homin asked if he was really weak. The monarch confirmed and ordered him to show what he was worth by becoming stronger. The monarch needed to see that the boy was capable of following orders. Hajin began to lead Homin around the palace. Homin asked where they were going, but Hajin didn't tell him. Homin asked if all of the ruler's hunters were so rude. Hajin didn't even greet him properly. Hajin turned toward Homin and looked at him sternly. It was as if he was drilling Homin with his eyes. Homin thought he had touched a nerve. Hajin pointed to the door to his left. He said that Homin would be here now. They entered the room, and Homin immediately realized that this was his new home. There were 2 beds in the room. Hajin noticed that his companion liked it. Of course, it was a warm and clean room. And the blanket was incredibly fluffy. Hajin said he had heard that Homin had received a platinum plating from the monarch. Homin confirmed this, and asked what was wrong with it. Hajin lifted up his headband. Underneath it, he could also see the eye with the seal on it. He advised Homin not to fool himself into thinking it was some kind of great gift, like the idiots who had come to the palace before him. Of course, Homin knew that a seal could be on any part of the body, but it was very strange to see it on the socket of an eye. Hajin changed the subject to another. He said that a platinum coin was worth 10 gold coins. Homin did not understand what he was saying. Hajin said that it was just a convention. Gold and platinum have the same purity and weight. Baek Homin still didn't understand. You can mine gold in the tower, but you can't make platinum. Only the monarch can create it. That is why platinum is not distributed and is only used for symbolic purposes. It can also be used as a catalyst in rare alchemy, so its price is higher than gold. Homin understood why platinum was 10 times more expensive. Some people have always wanted something extravagant. If platinum is really a symbol of a monarch, then there will be people who will use this metal for their authority. Hajin said that 3 platinum coins were used for the Homin seal. Another coin was also used to buy medicine from the alchemist's guild. Good medicine is expensive. Homin thought if he could only earn 1 gold coin in 10 years, he was now 400 years in debt. Homin said that he did not ask for this. Should he really have to pay for it? Hajin said that the monarch would not ask for money for this as long as Homin was her hunter. Homin tensely asked what would happen if he stopped being the ruler's hunter. Hajin said that the platinum monarch would take his kidneys, bile, spine, cornea, stomach, blood, hair, skin, bones, and heart. She will exchange every gram of his body for platinum. Homin was wary. He had seen this process before. One accident, and Homin will turn into Hyunsu or other criminals. Hajin continued. He said there was no point in hiding his abilities. Baek Homin should do his best to prove his worth. In addition, by the order of the monarch, Hajin will be at his side 24 hours a day. Hajin's report will decide Homin's fate. Death or pardon. 24 hours a day. Homin realized why there were 2 beds in the room. He didn't like the prospect of sharing a bed with his warden. The Constellation started a dialogue about Kong Hajin. Each of the siblings had met him during his lifetime. The warrior king noted that despite the fact that the guy was paranoid, he was also a reliable friend to him. The king asked the other sovereigns what they thought of the boy. The others were not thrilled with him. The only one called Hajin a stalker and a pervert, and Dynamite said that the guy was constantly exploiting him for his own purposes. The only one said he wasn't worried about Kong Hajin and the structural changes in the tower that had never happened before. Dynamite agreed that it was an unusual phenomenon. The one had only one explanation for this, and that was the 3 of them. Baek Homin created a starry sky to demonstrate his theory to his comrades. Usually, the stars looked like scattered little specks in the sky, but now they were clustered together in groups. The constellations immediately recognized their star signs. They were disappearing from this world through rebirth, but their star signs remained. Dynamite understood why people were shocked to see constellations that did not exist. The warlike king noticed Dynamite's 8 stars. Dynamite, in turn, noticed the warrior king's 7 stars. Dynamite knew these stars because he had watched the king's life. Then the king switched to a bunch of stars that looked like a huge flock of fireflies. He assumed that this was a sign from the One. The One confirmed the assumption. The king was amazed. He could not even count the number of stars that had gathered. He had never thought that such a thing was possible. The Dynamites said that if their star signs were the cause of the changes, it would be impossible to count the events that followed. The only one agreed. But if the monarch trusted Hajin to watch Baek Homin, the boy would soon get his first job. Dynamite added that when the monarch finds someone with potential, she thoroughly tests that person for strength. Homin will have a hard time. In addition, the One noticed that in this life, Kong Hajin is determined to get rid of Baek Homin, and the screaming doll wants to execute him. The monarch will test Homin until he proves himself. The warrior king realized that they were all very unlucky. There is no telling what awaits them. After a while, the monarch's men were able to solve the security problem up to the 4th floor. Homin and Hajin walked up the tower. Homin was dressed as a government hunter. He did not like the clothes, they were not comfortable. Hajin said that he should wear it properly. As long as Homin is wearing this uniform, he represents the monarch himself. Hajin investigated how the structural changes had affected the lower floors over the past 6 months and found an area that had undergone minor changes. Then, predicting that the changes on the floors starting from the 5th floor were more severe, he returned to the palace. Homin asked why Hajin was back so early. The boy replied that his mentor had decided to go up to the 20th floor, and Hajin had returned to report that the elevators to the 4th floor might be open. Hajin said that they would now explore the 5th floor. Baek Homin pointed out that in that case, they would only be able to turn back once they reached the 10th floor. Homin didn't want to walk 5 floors with this weirdo. But Hajin ignored him again and told him to follow him. Homin thought that he had to hold on. Hajin is certainly not the nicest guy, but if they can become friends, it will be much easier. The 2 boys came to a cave with a mine inside. Hajin said that there was an elevator hidden somewhere and climbed into the trolley. This elevator was not available for public use. With the help of this elevator, they could get to the 7th floor. Homin said that the trolley and the cave were too small, but Hajin didn't listen to him again because he was busy doing his own thing. He was holding a coin and a knife. Very carefully, he cut off some gold from the coin, and it fell on the magic circle in front of the trolley. The circle immediately activated, and the boys irrigated from the spot. During the journey, Homin asked Hajin about the safety of this path and his confidence in where it would lead. But Hajin said that he had no idea where this elevator was going. The reason why it is inaccessible to the public is because he does not know the final point of the route. The ruler's hunters have used it many times, and if something goes wrong, it's because of structural changes in the tower. The trolley suddenly stopped. Baek Homin panicked a bit and looked down while Hajin remained calm. The reason for the stop was a malfunction of the rails. They were torn into 2 parts. But Hajin remained gravely calm. He said that the structural changes had taken place here, and therefore their work was about to begin. Baek Homin agreed, but suddenly heard a strange noise. Hajin said that it was just a little trouble. The noise was coming from a flock of giant cave beetles heading toward them. Baek Homin dropped the magic lamp, and the boys grabbed their weapons. Hajin said that they were lucky to be on the lower floors, and ordered Baek Homin to hold on. Baek Homin cut the bug in half. Hajin held a knife in each hand. Homin pierced another beetle with the knife. But there were too many of them. During the fight, Hajin was in no hurry to help Baek Homin, preferring to observe. He was waiting for the skill to be used. Baek Homin launched furious attacks on the enemy. After a while, they managed to slaughter all the bugs. For Baek Homin, the picture was not the most pleasant, and he felt a little sick from the amount of slime. Hajin asked him why he didn't use his skill. Homin said that it wasn't necessary. Hajin objected. If you receive the patronage of a constellation, you have to use it. Hajin said that you shouldn't hide your skills until you die. But Baek Homin replied that every time he activated the skill, his seal started to heat up. He didn't want to risk his hand every time. Hajin then lunged toward Baek Homin. He took him by the head and pushed him to the ground. Homin started yelling at the other man. His actions were unacceptable. Hajin said that he was watching Homin's battle with the vermin. The guy fought so recklessly, as if he had a couple more lives behind him. The monarch may have liked such courage, but Kong Hajin did not. Baek Homin aggressively asked him to remove his hand from his head. Hajin told him that the average lifespan of a government hunter is less than a year. He asked Baek Homin if he understood what that meant. Everyone except Hajin's mentor and himself either left, was killed, or was expelled from the palace within a year. In 2 years, Hajin buried more than 5 hunters who came after him. One of his students was a parasite, and the other was eaten by this parasite because he did not dare to kill his friend. Hajin had seen enough of people who died hiding their skills. He aggressively emphasized that skilled hunters do not die by tripping over a rock or from the common flu. They all fall victim to parasites. Baek Homin could not argue with this fact. The prey kills the hunter. Blacksmiths die because they are overconfident in their work. And alchemists die because of their greed. This is obvious. But after spending most of his life on the streets, Baek Homin also learned one thing. Most people die because of other people's greed. That's why he can't just trust others. It doesn't matter if it's Hajin or the Platinum Monarch. He cannot carelessly show off his skills or talk about constellations. The warrior king pointed out that even though Kong Hajin is not trustworthy right now, Homin is hiding a lot. But the one disagreed. It was better to let Baek Homin keep quiet about his connection to the constellations for as long as possible. Dynamite agreed, especially when it comes to Kong Hajin. For the past lives of memory skills, this is an incredible opportunity, but for the others, it's something frantic and unacceptable. If Homin talks about his memories that he couldn't possibly have, people will definitely start to suspect something. The king asked what exactly they would suspect. Dynamite replied that people shouldn't know that Baek Homin can be reborn. But the king said that maybe it was for the best. The boy would become famous and gain strong allies. Dynamite explained that the problem is the monarch. If she finds out about this ability and is not satisfied with the result, she will just start all over again. The king realized that the monarch could kill Baek Homin. Even though he didn't like this fact, the Platinum Monarch was a genius. She had learned many times that Baek Homin could be reborn. The only thing he didn't want to do was mess with her. If the monarch found out about the rebirth skill, she would try to kidnap him or use Baek Homin for her own purposes. The current Baek Homin doesn't know this, so he's probably instinctively hiding his skills to stay alive no matter what.